continuing the answer key for the natural disasters midterm. What happens to air as it rises in the atmosphere? Kind of a mantra that you can always use that helps with understanding the atmosphere is that rising air cools. And if you just memorize that, you can get through a lot of questions and problems. So in 12, that only leaves two answers, A and D. So also when air cools, cooling air also loses its ability to hold water vapor, and as the air cools, the water vapor will condense and clouds will form. So A is a good answer. Air that cools actually increases in density, so that's another reason why answer D is not correct. What would qualify a thunderstorm to be severe? According to the definitions that the definition that we used in class, the National Weather Service, anytime a tornado would be formed associated with a thunderstorm, it's obviously severe, there's no question. Any high winds, specifically winds of 58 miles per hour or more, and large hailstones, fairly large, the size of marbles or larger, essentially 0.75 inches in diameter. So 13 answers all of the above. 14, the lake effect stable season, which is pretty much just beginning right now, is the time of year when the lake temperatures are actually cooler than the typical atmosphere temperatures in the vicinity of large bodies of water, like the Great Lakes. So right now, the Lake Ontario is still quite cool, left over from the winter, and our air temperatures are starting to improve with a few exceptions. But for the most part, the air temperatures are headed towards spring and early summer. And the effect of that is the exact opposite of lake effect snow. So the temperature relationship is reversed and the effect is reversed. And actually the lake effect stable season, when the lake is cold during a warmer atmosphere season, what happens is that we actually get weather that's better than we would otherwise expect. And it's beautifully sunny looking out the window today, so I guess that's coming true. Also, characterizing the lake effect stable season is that, as I said, air temperatures are warmer than lake temperatures, and A is not true. Lake effect snow season may cause constant snowfall. So A is a bad answer, B and C are good. Explaining this question we've seen a couple times from the video about the Great Flood of 1927 on the Mississippi River called Fatal Flood. This is a particularly terrible example of social injustice in 1927, and although slavery had ended in the U.S. by law, at least in 1865, African Americans in the southern U.S. were still in a very, very disadvantageous economic and social situation. The 1927 floods seemed to provide an impetus for the black people of the South at that time to finally become absolutely fed up with their living conditions, natural disasters, as well as economic and social disadvantages, and literally the people, the rich landowning people who owned the farms and stuff, were afraid that their cheap semi-captive labor supply would actually leave the area because of the flood, and in response they were actually corralled onto the levees and actually forced to stay there. So the reason that this actually happened, the reason for the tragedy on the levees of hot weather, disease, cold weather, and all kinds of miserable living conditions was answer B, because the rich people didn't want the captive labor force, to abusive labor market to leave. One thing that was particularly notable, there were boats that were available, some steamers and riverboats were available to evacuate them, and the rich people of the town leaders, sent the boats away empty and left the black people on the levees. And levees are not a good place to grow crops just because there's not very much surface area. So the answer is B. On which side of the plate boundary are volcanoes typically not found? On which type of plate boundary? Well, subduction zones are the absolute most likely. Mid-ocean ridges where the earth is splitting apart, there are volcanoes occurring there, including the country of Iceland. Continental rifts, whilst they are fairly mild tectonically, there can be volcanoes at continental rifts. At transform faults, one does not see volcanoes forming. If you see a volcano with gentle slopes, large area, this is a common question. This is by definition a shield volcano, and you don't even have to look at any of the other parts of the answer to solve the shield volcano. A hydrograph is a water picture, so it shows, and actually the picture is the water or flow rate with respect to time. So A is a good answer, and as I said, it also has a time axis, which is an answer that's built into A as well. Hydrographs have nothing to do with costs or risks or risk or damages. So C is not a valid answer. In 19, this is just a question about applying the definition of the safety factor. The safety factor is resisting force divided by driving force. So 20 divided by 40 is 0.5. And the units cancel out, so it doesn't even matter whether you know what a Newton is or not as a unit of force. So 20 divided by 40 is 0.5, and since it's less than 1, and also because the driving forces, which would tend to make the landslide happen, are bigger than resisting forces, this is an unsafe condition. So the answer is C. This question number 20 is one that I had second thoughts about, but it was out there, so I was generous in the grading on this one. As a hill slope gets steeper, I'll explain what I wanted you to understand and know and learn from this topic, as opposed to what the question might have come out like. If a hill slope is steeper, the Homer index is meaningless. If the hill slope gets steeper, it does not allow the resistive force to become stronger. So the steeper it is, the resistive force gets weaker. So B is an actual is a wrong answer. It's an opposite from a good answer. In C, gravity doesn't become stronger. Gravity is the same everywhere all day long. So and that might have been a bit confusing in the way that was worded, but gravity doesn't change. Gravity is always the same. So C is not a good answer. D is the answer that I think I intended as I wrote the question, because the steeper the hill slope becomes, the smaller the portion of gravity that is holding the material in place. But I also accepted answer E just in case answer D was turned out to be too poorly worded and you knew the topic but the question was confusing. So answer D or E are both acceptable. The answer I like the best is D, however. People killed by tornadoes in South Asia, the principal issue around that is actually it's several issues. People in countries that are poorer are not able to afford well-built homes to protect themselves from flying debris. There's a lot more people in Asia, so that a tornado covering a certain area will affect a lot more people, and people in poor countries tend not to be able to afford or maintain early warning systems. The last question is a numeric question, and it's an estimate of the recurrence interval. And the way this one works is we discover that n, which is the number of years of record, is 7. And so there are 7 years of record, and the rank of this particular storm is number 2. So the formula goes the number of years of record plus 1, 7 plus 1 is 8, divided by the rank, which is number 2. So 8 over 2 is 4, and you could have picked either C or G, or both, in order to answer that question.